Hello. Today we're going to talk a little bit about collaboration. And when we think about collaboration, oftentimes we think about people coming into groups and teams and working together. And one of the things that's really important in the definition of collaboration is that we're not always have to be in a place that willingly wants to work with somebody. But the idea of collaboration is actually a choice that we make to cooperate, sometimes unwillingly, but really with the basis that we have a common goal that we want to achieve. And so when we think about those common goals, sometimes they can be very difficult to define. And so one of the first steps is to define what that common goal looks like. And there may be components of one party and the other that need to come together to create a possibility of an outcome that really builds a good team or a good outcome or a good process that impacts both parties. So often as a leader, when we come in to try and help facilitate those kinds of collaborative processes and collaborative styles, if you we need to understand what collaborative leadership looks like. One of the first things is really to recognize what motives are and recognize that different people have different goals, different motives, different values, and to identify them and understand how they come together to form a common goal can be really important. Oftentimes we talk about the patient experience or the patient outcome or the process being more efficient or productivity being up. Sometimes these are too vague and we need to be real specific and develop smart goals that can really help identify what we're really going for. One of the key components of a collaborative leader is, as that's being facilitated, is how we build trust. Trust sounds like a big word and it's got a lot of stuff to it, but really it happens in small moments. It's really when people feel valued and heard, when they feel validated, and when they feel like that the other person gets them. And they feel that I can be open with this person without judgment, without a violation of values or boundaries. And so when you think about that as a leader, one of the things you have to ask yourself in the interactions you're having is this a moment I'm building trust, or am I tearing down trust? And again, in these small moments, that's when trust really gets built. As a collaborative leader, we want to avoid any micromanagement. We want to try and help facilitate defining the outcome, defining how we're going to get to that outcome. But then we don't want to micromanage that process. We want to delegate it. We want to help hold people accountable for results, but also we don't want to feel like every detail needs to be under our control. We also want to employ, or we want to recruit diverse talents and skill sets that are needed to achieve the results. Oftentimes, as a leader, we feel we have a lot of responsibility to kind of come up with the solution. And sometimes that's true, but we also need those around us and other stakeholders to be involved in what's impacting them and the work, so that those diverse perspectives, diverse talents, diverse skill sets come together and really help provide very different perspectives than what we have. The thing that, as a leader or as a participant in the collaborative process, that is really important is how open am I being to those different perspectives, different ideas. I don't have to necessarily agree, but can I at least validate? Can I understand them, understand where somebody's coming from, and say, oh, okay, I get where you're coming from. I don't necessarily agree with all of that, but at least I get where you're coming from. I get the conclusion you're coming to based on what you're describing to me as what your perspective is. That requires us to really have a stance that's a sense of humility that says, I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. I don't know all the answers. And that there are other people around me that are smart, that have different skills that they can introduce into the process that can actually be very helpful. So when we're doing that, that also means that we have to foster interdepartment collaboration. This is a great way for us to tear down silos, right? When we think about different departments, they typically think about themselves, so think about the impact it has on them, without necessarily having a broader vision of what is our goal as an organization, what's our goal as a team, and if we can work together, we'll all benefit from that. And so We want to make sure that the appropriate tasks are delegated to the appropriate people. Again, as a leader, our goal is to facilitate the process. It's not to necessarily do all the tasks needed. And by promoting delegation to those around you, you actually foster an increased trust in their abilities. We also need to understand that we don't have all the answers. And sometimes we need to make a step, take a little bit of a risk, and recognize that we learn in the process. We may learn that this isn't the right step to make, but then we can pull it back and take another step. But I can tell you, each time we take a step, we're going to learn something. Maybe good, maybe bad, but we will learn something that will help us in the overall process. One of the real big keys is understanding that as a leader, as a collaborative leader, empathy is really important. Now, empathy is not an excuse for emotion. It is an understanding of emotion. It's understanding how people feel about the process they're in. It's also a great way of building trust is to reflect back what people are feeling or what they might be feeling, and then to ask them to share with you what's actually going on. An example of that might be, let's say we're changing a process in clinic, and the front desk is now being told to do something different, and they may not have been involved in the process of change. And so you notice that the receptionist has maybe got a little bit of an attitude. And so having empathy would be, hey, I'm noticing that there's something that's really bothering you, and I can understand that some of these changes might be difficult and challenging. You might be feeling that you don't really have a say in what's going on. Is that what you're feeling? Is there anything more that you'd like to share about that? By opening that door, we then foster this environment that says, I'm not afraid of what you're feeling. I want to hear what you're feeling. What you have to say is really important. One of the biggest challenges as a leader in any setting is how we manage conflict. And oftentimes, conflict comes from different perspectives, different assumptions. It comes from different places that say, I see things differently than you do. And I can't resolve those differences. And because I can't resolve those differences in perspective, we now have a conflict, tension builds, and some of that communication gets lost as a result of it. So when we think about how we manage conflict, we want to really think about how do we allow people to be heard, how do we validate them, and how do we understand how they feel about what their stance is. Recognizing that, again, we may not agree with it, but we can at least understand it in a way that allows that individual to feel like they matter in the process. And I think one of the last things as a collaborative leader is how do we value openness and honesty. And sometimes that openness and honesty can be at us and maybe not feel so good. I can remember a time when I was leading a team, and we were in the process of trying to decide on recruiting some additional individuals. And I remember being very open about, here's my concerns, here's what I think this individual, if we bring them on board into our team, might need as support or might need as additional pieces if we make that decision. But I have some concerns and some red flags around the resume and around the way that they interviewed. And somebody around the table said, well, you're being a negative person, and it just seems like you don't like this person. The reality is, if we're going to be collaborative, we have to be able to say difficult things sometimes. Now, we say it with respect, we say it with kindness, we say it without judgment. We're really saying we're looking at the best interest of us as a team, us as an organization, us as for the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, and really saying, if we're going to be honest, then we can actually make better decision making. We can have better decision making. So what that really means is that we have to have a paradigm in collaboration. The paradigm has to be humility, honesty, openness, empathy, transparency, and understand that conflict, when it occurs, is something that is normal, and that really it means that I, as a leader, need to try and understand what the different perspectives are and try and find that common ground and common goal that we're looking for. I hope this was helpful, at least as a beginning look and thought around collaboration, and I look forward to talking with you guys more about that as we move on.